Hey everyone, it's Selwen here. Now Havoc is a bit of a weird one, as in, it's a bit disappointing coming into Shadowlands because it is one of the very few specs and classes really, outside of Shadow Priest, which has tons of issues, but it's one of those specs that going into Shadowlands, you're not gonna find, at least so far, anything new, anything exciting. It's pretty much the same, but without all the crazy goodies that we have now currently in the game, in retail. So it's a bit disappointing overall, because it's just more of the same, but slightly tweaked. And not in a good way, as most of these tweaks are essentially nerfs to your spec. So again, outside of the very small tweaks that we're getting, the spec at its core plays exactly the same. So if you're a fan of the current playstyle, you're gonna be fine. The only issue, of course, is that you're not gonna be as fast-paced as you currently are with all the traits and corruptions and all of that. So obviously you're gonna roll back a little bit, but at its core, it is still pretty much the same spec. You can take that as a positive or, well, as a negative. I for sure take it as a negative because I was expecting more of Havoc in Shadowlands. Something new, you know what I mean? Something exciting, some new toys, something. But, you're not. So, let's take a look at our base toolkit and see what has changed. So, Blade Dance. Now, Blade Dance, the most apparent nerf that you're gonna get is the fact that you no longer get the dodge chance attached to it, the dodge component of the ability. Now, this is an obvious nerf to PvP players, to PvP Havoc. In PvE, it doesn't affect it too much. And that's the type of content that I don't do much. I'm not going to talk too much about that, but just letting you know that, yeah, the dodge chance is gone. It only is active during beta. So you're going to have to time that in a little bit better than before. Then we get, actually, Blade Dance got another nerf, but this is a nerf that is going across the board in Shadowlands. It's a nerf to a target cap. So you now have a target cap of 5 enemies, okay? Well, 6 if you count the primary target. Now, again, this is a nerf, a change really that is happening across the board in Shadowlands, and so this is not a huge deal. Is it a nerf to your AoE damage with Blade Dance? Yes, but it's happening to everybody. And in real situations, when you're doing a normal dungeon, when you're doing a normal Mythic Plus and stuff like that, you're not going to notice it too much. This is just to break the meta, pun intended, of just the huge trash pools of Mythic Plus, okay? Then I-Beam. Now I-Beam, again, was nerfed. It now deals reduced damage to secondary targets, okay? So again, much like Blade Dance, it's going to deal less damage. You're still going to hit all targets. It's still going to feel great. It will just deal less damage. From what I have seen, is about 50% less damage, so half the damage on secondary targets. But again, like the Blade Dance, not a huge deal when you take into account that everybody is getting these types of nerfs. Now, another substantial nerf is that it no longer deals 50% extra damage on your primary target. That's harming a little bit the demonic sort of build that you're going for in Havoc. That is still very prevalent in Shadowlands by the looks of things. So yeah, that's 2 nerfs on I-Beam, but there you go. Outside of that, you do getting a new baseline ability, and that is Immolation Aura, so you no longer have to talent into it. However, the Fury component of it does not come with it. You still have to talent into the Fury part of the ability. So it's good, but it's also not a huge deal to have it baseline. And we'll go over that in a bit when you go over, the talents. The only other change that you've gotten is on meta. So now meta also resets the cooldown of I-Beam and Blade Dance. And you get this at level 52, I believe. So you're going to have to level a little bit in Shadowlands to get that ability. Now, this was something that was in Legion, I believe. Was a talent that worked amazingly for Demonic. So basically what it will allow you to do was you will first go into Demonic I-Beam and then go into Meta, and then you would get the extended it by 8 seconds or whatever the demonic meta lasted back then, and then you could use another I-beam because it reset the cooldown, and you extend it even further for like 40 plus meta. So that's back again in the game, so that's pretty cool, but that's really only affects the demonic build, so it's an extra push to demonic build. But yeah, so that pretty much covers your abilities. Again, nothing new, nothing too shiny, no big changes outside of just nerfs. So talents. Now talents is where I think Havoc has a lot of issues. There's a lot, and I do mean a lot, of dead talents in Havoc. And not only dead talents you have in Havoc, but you also have a lot of dead builds. Because Havoc has about 3, if not more, builds that you can create within your talents. Now, most people just go demonic and forget about everything else, but you do have other stuff here. Now, a lot of these builds will come down to numbers, and that's something that I don't want to talk about here. I'm just talking about gameplay, how things feel. But they still feel crap, and I'll go over them in a little bit. So in the first tier, everything is the same except for Demonic Appetite. Now, Demonic Appetite will also buff your I-beam. So it now will reduce the I-beam cooldown 2 seconds per soul fragment consumed up to 15 seconds. Okay? So you're pretty much going to have double the amounts of I-beams if you eat up all the little soul fragments. It's a little bit competitive towards Blind Fury. Right? It's competing with Blind Fury, even though both of them are still pushing you through Demonic. Both of these talents synergize well with Demonic. The issue with this is that, one, getting the double amount of I-beams is not as satisfying and doesn't feel as good as getting Blind Fury. Because with Blind Fury, every time you go I-beam and then you go into a meta with Demonic, you're going to get a full bar of Fury to then spend on Chaos Strikes, Blade Dances, and etc. With Demonic Appetite, that doesn't always happen unless you have a lot of fragments to provide you with the Fury. Another issue that I have fundamentally with the Demonic Appetite playstyle is that you have to run around to consume the soul fragments. Okay? You're going to have to move around a lot, like Mario, like Pac-Man, to eat up all the orbs. And for the most part, you're going to absorb them naturally. But a lot of the times, some of the orbs, you're going to have to move to physically get them. That's an issue in real situations in a game. Be in a raid, be in a Mythic Plus. Which makes it very hard to then maximize the cooldown reduction of I-beam. Okay? Because then you come up with 2 decisions to make. You either stop attacking, or you quickly fell rush to gather an orb or stuff like that, or you just forget about it. Both of those situations, both of those decisions will lead to the same outcome, losing DPS. Okay? The natural idea, the fundamental idea of Demonic Appetite, that you have to run around, minimal running around to gather the orbs, goes against what WoW really is, how WoW plays. And that's overall an issue that I have with another build that you have in the game, which is Momentum. But I'll talk about that a bit when we get to the third tier here, and I will talk a little bit about my issues with Momentum. Okay, so that's my issues with Demonic Appetite. Is it competing with Blind Fury? It is. Okay, it definitely is, but isn't enough. I still think Blind Fury still feels best, and it's not enough. I think fundamentally this talent is not fun unless you're leveling, unless you're doing Torghast, unless you're doing PvP maybe, like Battlegrounds and stuff like that. But in real situations, raids, Mythic Plus, it's just annoying. Okay, that's what it comes down to. It's annoying, and you come up with decisions, awful decisions to make as a DPS player. Then you have Fellblade, which is the same, and that will basically combine with Demon Blades. Now this build right here, Fellblade, Demon Blades, the Demon Blades build, the meme build that we had back in Legion, is essentially a dead fish floating down the river. It's here, but it is completely useless. Now, there is some number stuff here, obviously. Maybe in Shadowlands the numbers say that Demon Blades will be the best build again. I don't know. But what I do know is that this build, it doesn't really function. Okay, this build functioned and worked really well in Legion because we had Chaos Plates, the last tier talent, that buffed our auto attack damage and chaos damage and stuff like that. A meme build that only required you to press a single button really, but it worked. Right now, I don't feel that it works. It doesn't flow well. It feels clunky. It feels very, very, very weird. And there's nothing really in the talents that makes it work. Either it needs to get a revamp or just needs to go. I don't think it has a place. So the other two, Burning Hatred, again, this is what I was saying about the Immolation Aura. If you don't take Burning Hatred, Immolation Aura is just an AoE damaging ability, which is fine, but then you're gonna have to take Insatiable Hunger, not Demon Blades, because we discussed the issues with that. So you're gonna have to take this. This doesn't feel like a huge deal. Now, it did get a buff, a small buff, to provide Demon's Bite an extra 20% more damage. And then you get the Fury, the additional Fury. Now, the additional Fury is not a sure thing, right? Because your Demon's Bite generates 20 to 30, and this will make it generate 20 to 40, I believe. Let me just check. Yeah, 20 to 40. So you're gonna have more randomized Fury generation, okay? Why pick this on an ability that you barely even use? Like Demon's Bite, it's a filler. Why take this when you can just reliably get 80 Fury, which you can combine into your meta, which you can combine into Demonic and just get a lot of Fury passively that generates over time to free you up global cooldowns to allow you to do extra Chaos Strikes and Blade Dances and stuff like that. This still feels very prominent. And I'm not talking about numbers, I'm talking about how it feels. This feels miles better than just picking any of these other two, which in the end make these two other talents still dead. Then you get the third tier. Fel Mastery was buffed. It now deals a 50% extra damage. Your Fel Rushes deal 150% extra damage as opposed to 100%, which I think is the BFA variant. The Momentum build is much like Demonic Appetite. It's a build that feels very clunky, and this is a little bit subjective, but bear with me. It's a build that it feels very clunky. It requires you to use Fel Rush every 6 seconds to keep up the buff, the Momentum buff. And forces you to use Vengeful Retreat to also get the buff, the Fury buff. Now, in theory, the damage buff, the Fury buff, the extra damage on Fel Mastery to just deal a lot of AoE damage with Fel Rushes, it's great. And Fel Mastery might be really good for, say, Mythic Blast to AoE with, especially with our nerfs to I-Beam and Blade Dance. But the Momentum build just doesn't work in WoW. And what I mean by this is that WoW, it's an old game, right? It's an old game engine. And running around with Fel Rushes and Vengeful Retreats simply doesn't work. It feels awkward, it feels clunky, it doesn't make sense. Especially when you add the fact that raids, that Mythic Plus have tactics, right? There's a lot of things that you need to do in those types of content, right? What if you are in a situation that you cannot move, or you have a really tight platform, a boss with a really tight platform? I mean, there's tons of examples that you can make where movement is going to fuck you in the ass. And Momentum is forcing you to always be on the move. It forces you to move all the time, and that doesn't work in WoW. Maybe some people can make it work, but fundamentally, it's flawed in the way that WoW works. Fel Barrage, whatever you pronounce it. It's still great, okay? These two are great. You either, like, Trail of Ruin, Fel Barrage, they're fine, okay? You either want burst or you either want sustained AoE damage. Do remember, again, that Blade Dance now only hits 5-6 targets, so this dot will only go to those 5 or 6 targets, while Barrage, which also only hits 5 targets, but this will deal a lot of burst damage. So this is a decent decision to make. Then we got the fifth tier. The fifth tier, it's another problem, okay? First Blood makes the spec function, okay? Blade Dance without First Blood, at least in single target, doesn't really work. It's way too expensive. The damage is not worth. You take First Blood, obviously because of Demonic, because of meta and stuff, and because it makes the spec more entertaining. It makes the spec more fun outside of just clicking Chaos Strikes and Demon's Bites, and then your I-beams and cooldowns and stuff like that. First Blood, in my opinion, needed to be baseline at this point, because it's the mandatory talent that you need to take. I don't even really think about these other two talents. I know that I need to click Blade Dance, and First Blood makes Blade Dance work correctly. But okay, let's look at the other talents. So we have Essence Break, okay? Now, Essence Break is the new Dark Slash, I believe. It's the same thing as Dark Slash, but now AoEs. So it slashes all targets. And it also buffs your Blade Dance, not just your Chaos Strikes. But now think about this. The buff only lasts for 8 seconds. Your Blade Dance cooldown with minimal haste and without 6% haste, and without a meta as an 8-second cooldown. So let's assume with good gear and a meta and stuff like that, you have a Blade Dance cooldown of 5 or 4 seconds. At best, you're going to be able to fit 2 Blade Dances in this window. At best with gear. Without gear, 1 Blade Dance. On a 20-second cooldown. So now, what's worth? Having to burn global cooldowns to prepare Essence Break to allow you to do 1 big-ish Blade Dance every 8 seconds, every 20 seconds, or just have First Blood, which is a talent that will make Blade Dance far more usable due to the reduction cost of Fury, and also make it worth both in numbers and, well, in your rotation in single target because of the damage increase to the first target struck. Without measuring numbers, without doing any sort of theory crafting, you can just look at this and think, First Blood feels better. So I appreciate the efforts to make Dark Slash a little bit more interesting, a little bit more powerful, but I don't think it is there yet. Okay? Now, Cycle of Hatred, I cannot talk, is simply not enough. Okay? When Chaos Strike prevents Fury, it also reduces the cooldown of meta. It's too much RNG. Chaos Strikes to refund Fury, it has a 40% chance. It's too much on RNG, and it comes down to also like boss timers and stuff like that to make this ability worth. But then again, you have to fight it over First Blood, and that's an issue. So again, this is another tier where the 2 talents other than First Blood are completely dead. And this talent is normal, and then the last tier talent, again, I discussed the issues with Momentum. Demonic is exactly the same, except that now only lasts for 6 seconds. So it's again an obvious nerf to Demonic build, but at least you still have the good old playstyle. Then you have Nemesis, which I don't know what other spec has such a boring last tier talent. I mean, it's so boring. Like when I saw this for the first time in BFI, I was just stunned, really. Like a last tier talent, which is just a cooldown that increases your damage by 20% for 1 minute. I don't know where this fits. Outside of, again, some weird builds that Havoc can create, and I can imagine this for PvP, where does this fit? The Demon's Blade build? I guess. But Demon Blade's build has its all sorts of issues on itself. So as you can see, Havoc has a lot of issues in your talents, as in dead talents. There's a lot of talents that don't really make sense, that there is talents that are clearly superior than others, and there's talents that feel mandatory for the spec. Okay? And for a spec that has so many different builds to play, only one feels good. So anyway, I'm not going to lose any more time with that. I could probably talk about that for an hour, and Havoc is not even my main. It's that crazy. So let's talk about Covenants. Now, Covenants, we have the Bastion Covenant, the Kyrian Covenant, which is Elysium Decree. I probably said that wrong. Apologies. But it's essentially a rune. Okay, so it's a little bit weird for Havoc. It's a rune that deals AoE damage. A lot of AoE damage, but again, number stuff might be tuned. And shatters lesser soul fragments. Now, using the ability itself, like in AoE situations and stuff like that, it's fine. It's an extra AoE ability that you get, especially in an expansion where, I-Beam is nerfed and Blade Dance is nerfed and stuff like that. So it's an extra AoE ability that you get that you can also use for a single target. The issue with this, well, there's 2 issues with that. One is because it's a sigil, essentially. And if targets move, well, you're going to lose a ton of DPS, right? So I'm not usually a fan of like optional abilities that are ground-based. There's always that annoying issue if the tank moves the mobs and stuff like that, and your ability doesn't hit. So that's one issue I have with this ability. The other issue is that the soul fragments. The soul fragments are clearly there for the vengeance spec, for the tank spec. Because for Havoc, besides healing, they are not really giving you much, right? They're not really giving you much. Unless you go for Demonic Appetite. With Demonic Appetite, there is an interesting synergy there. So you can time this ability when your IBM is off cooldown, or well, on cooldown, so you can reduce it. The issue with that is the issues that we discussed about Demonic Appetite. Then we have Sinful Brand. This is the Venthyr Covenant ability. This is a dot, essentially, that you place on 1 minute cooldown. It also carries a debuff that reduces melee and casting speeds by 30%. Now, the 30% seems overly overtuned. I mean, it's completely nuts. Like 30% reduction on casting speed and melee speed. It's a lot, dude. I wouldn't be surprised if those numbers get brought down. But overall, I mean, it's an ability, an extra ability that you're going to click, that you're going to stack with cooldowns. That's really it. But you do get an interesting component of this Covenant ability, and that is when you activate Meta, it will apply Sinful Brands to all nearby targets. So planning this around, it's cool. The only issue is that Meta is such a big cooldown that the situations where this will be useful and perform great will be very niche, will be, again, very situational. It will be awesome to like be in a boss that has a lot of ads and you time this thing correctly and you pull this synergy correctly. But again, it's very niche. Be as it may, pretty cool. Then we have Father to the Flame. Now, Father to the Flame, I don't get. Like, I honestly do not get. This ability will summon a demon for you to fight. Okay? And this demon that you fight, when killed, will drop a pool of blood. Now, the demon itself will serve well for you to pad damage because it's an extra add that you get. I'm not entirely sure if other people can see it, but it's essentially an extra add. Now the pool will provide you with a buff that will increase your attack damage and reduces the damage enemies deal to you by 10%. Now this for Vengeance, it's pretty okay, so on bosses and stuff like that don't require movement, this buff, this ability will perform decently enough. But for Havoc, just getting attack speed by 20%, I mean, I guess will be good for Demon Blades build, but the issue with this is that the pool will restrict your movement. And as far as I know, Havoc is not a mage, okay? So basically this is a rune of power for Havoc, which is the most nonsensical thing ever, because Havoc is a spec that likes to move around, especially with the momentum build and stuff like that, and getting an ability that wants you to stay in the same place, I mean, it just doesn't compute in my brain. Anyway, a little bit of a miss here. I think Father to the Flame really needs to change somehow. Maybe the buff, maybe just the pool of blood, it needs to either be bigger or just completely be revamped entirely. Then we get the Hunt for the Night Fae ability, and this is just completely nuts, at least for PvP. In PvE, it's not a huge deal. Basically, you charge at an enemy, it deals an nature damage, and will root them. But when the target is marked, it will increase your Fury generation with your Demon's Might, which is not a huge deal for Havoc, but reactivating the Hunt, the ability itself, will allow you to teleport behind the target and ignore line of sight. So yeah, this for PvP, if it stays the way that it is, which I'll be surprised if it does, will be completely insane. Completely insane. For PvE, again, it's not a huge deal outside of some niche situations, just like the small component of Sinful Brand. Okay, so it'll be very niche for PvE, but for PvP, I mean, if it stays the way that it is, this is a must for PvP. So you have to make do with the Night Fae Covenant, which will be real weird as a Demon Hunter. But yeah, that pretty much covers our Covenant abilities. But again, do take in mind that we are still missing a lot of components of Covenants like Soulbinds and stuff like that. So it's not all about the abilities. So yeah, I mean, that covers the Demon Hunter, the Havoc Demon Hunter. Overall, I'm not overly excited about this. I mean, it still is a very fun spec to play, don't get me wrong. In Torghast, I mean, I'll still advise everyone to play a Havoc in Shadowlands just for Torghast. It's fantastic. It's bloody fantastic. But overall, mechanically, I mean, there's really not a lot of interesting things going on here outside of Demonic again. So if everything stays the way it is, going into closed beta and stuff like that, it seems that Demonic will rule supreme again, and your playstyle will stay the same, but less, because you don't have all the crazy toys from BFI, and you have the small nerfs. So yeah, that's the life of a Havoc going into Shadowlands so far, and that does it for me for this video. A little bit too long, but there was a lot to talk about. So yeah guys, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.